Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, a show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Alexis Fink, who is the Vice President of People Analytics and Workforce Strategy at Facebook. Welcome to the show, Alexis. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. First and foremost, what an amazing background you have. I feel like I'm in the jungle.
I'm really lucky. This is our first couple of weeks of work from home with the coronavirus and the health crisis, and we're all self-isolating, and I'm fortunate that I have a lovely backyard and a nice sunroom, so I can get natural light and a little bit of nature.
Nice. Before we jump in, just tell everyone briefly a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Oh, wow. What a great question. So as it turns out, I've actually been working in people analytics since the early 90s. As a child, I got a chance to move and grow up in Asia, and I got really fascinated by the way different groups of people solved fairly universal problems. And when I was in college, I was fortunate that there was a woman in my building who had a graduate degree in industrial organizational psychology. I had the opportunity to do an internship as a 19-year-old and was completely hooked. So I've had now the privilege to live and work in several places around the world, do this kind of work for a number of global brands. I've done this kind of work for BASF, for Microsoft, for Intel, and now. And you asked sort of how I got here and who I am personally as well. I've got 3 kids and have the opportunity to now stay connected to my family that's around the world using the technologies for the company that I get to spend every day working to support and make better.
So you were in People Analytics before People Analytics was cool.
I was definitely just pure dumb luck that this became really hip right around the time that I'd pretty well figured out a couple of the basics anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure back then it wasn't even called People Analytics.
It was not even called People Analytics. I was just practicing industrial organizational psychology. And then about 10, 15 years into my career, there was that HBR article competing on analytics that everybody cites. And then folks started calling it People Analytics instead. And I said, here I am. Great. I've been doing this a while. Let's have fun.
Amazing. So what is it about the space that you love? What is it that's kept you engaged for so long?
So first off, I really still am deeply in love with how different groups of people solve fundamental problems. And that's a lot of what we get to do with People Analytics. I also have a deep and abiding love for math and for computer science. We got our first computer in about 1978. I started writing code when I was 7 years old. So I've just told you all how old I am. And I really, really loved how things that were nearly impossible to do manually or intuitively could become very clear. I remember an early project in about 2001 where I got to use an agent-based model to essentially diagnose and optimize a really old factory and prevent a small town from losing its only employer. Really just had powerful experiences where things that were beyond the capacity of a single human to ingest and understand could really be done with computing power, with mathematics. The opportunity to tie that to economics, the opportunity to tie that to culture, the opportunity to tie that to all kinds of other fascinating disciplines. It's just the most interesting nexus of anything I could.
It's like never ending. It's never ending. That's why we were talking about that before the show. It's like a never ending field of possibilities and things to jump into. It's like, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And beyond that, people spend more of their lives working than just about anything else. And so if I can help make the most common feature of most people's lives, work lives better, then that's fantastic. One quick little story about why I love this. Did a project years and years ago. And at the beginning of it, 3 of the gentlemen in the work group that we were focusing on were separated from their family. They were in the process of divorce. And about a year later, I happened to be at the Christmas party for this particular business. And all 3 of the wives came up to me and just said, basically, he's not a jerk anymore. And it's like, I don't know what you taught him or what you did, but literally we're saving marriages with some of the skills and the restructuring work. And that just, it makes your heart really happy.
I was not expecting that one. That's a really cool story.
I wasn't either.
That came from left field. No, that's amazing. How does the 7-year-old get into coding? Take me back there for a second. Like, cause did someone in the family introduce you to it? I was about to say, cause like, it's not something you just pick up, I'm sure.
Bless my dad. He had been working with great big vacuum tube computers in the 60s at university. His intention had been to be a physics professor, and life kind of got in the way. But the instant Radio Shack came out with that first computer. We sure had one in the basement.
Yeah.
As a good, wonderful, supportive, feminist father, he made sure that I got my hands on it from the minute it entered the house. Of course, you weren't doing anything very sophisticated in those days. But I got the opportunity because I was living overseas, computer science, my first year of high school. I got again in college and then again in graduate school. So every time I turned around, there was a new programming language or a new set of methods to tackle. And they were just such powerful tools. So if you can combine that with, I also have some background in organization development, so change management. I got certified as an executive coach 15 or 18 years ago. So when you combine all of these things together, you can really do some powerful things.
Yeah. What kind of problems can we solve with people analytics? What are some of the things that are exciting you at the moment?
Oh, gosh. I think of people analytics as kind of existing in a three-dimensional space. One of the ways that folks will often talk about it is as part of an employee lifecycle. So that might be an x-axis. And within my own team and prior teams I've run, we'll actually start that all the way before people even become employees. So in my current role, one of the things that's really exciting is the way that we're engaging with sustainable community. And Facebook's $1 billion commitment to housing and housing sustainability, that goes into engagements in communities, people who may ultimately become employees, and the communities in which our employees need to live and work, all the way through all of the work of doing selection well and effectively managing a recruiting function, onboarding people, helping them learn, helping them transition, explore their careers, remain engaged, supporting managers, growing the leadership capability that we might need, all the way through the employee life cycle. Every single thing that is fascinating and requires a great combination of knowledge and intuition, as well as rigorous testing through data and through analytics, and an opportunity to connect that to the stakeholders who have to make decisions. So then you're using visualization and influencing skills. If you think about a y-axis vertically, then you can think about the level of aggregation. We do work where we're looking at individuals as well as teams and organizations, and then companies within, and moving into communities and even into entire industries, and how we might be trying to influence how an industry might work. And then I also like to think about the z-axis, moving out vertically in space. And that's the kind of analytical capacity we get to. My current team actually owns some of the back-end headcount operations, as well as a great deal of just counting, which is harder than it sounds. Putting that into visualizations, and then doing work that might be predictive, sort of classic methods like machine learning, and finally moving into work that might be more prescriptive, where you're looking at optimization models or other kinds of things that say, here is what you should do. If this is the outcome you see, here's how you bend the curve in order to get there, the tools and the portfolio you might use to do that. So we actually have this fantastic three-dimensional space. I'm actually excited about each point in that space. But more than that, your question was, what am I most excited about? I'm most excited about the fact that we can do all of it in an integrated and coherent way. It's just really powerful.
A lot of information there, a lot to digest, a lot to think about. For everyone, for people that are just sort of getting started on this journey, because many companies, people analytics is still very new to most of the business we speak to. What are your advice to them in terms of where to get started? What do you choose? What to do? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see that most people face.
It really is. And my advice to them is usually twofold. First of all, you absolutely have to get your data house in order. And that often is a fairly long journey and a fairly thankless journey, and one that executives are impatient with. So part of the way you buy time while you are getting your mental data house in order and learning how to do things like just count how many employees we have, which is much more difficult than it sounds.
Yeah, people don't realize that, do they? I was surprised when I first started asking those questions at some of our workshops and people couldn't give us an accurate answer. I was like, really? I was like, so you go.
Seems like, how many people in your family? Of course you should know how many employees you have, but it's a much more complicated question than it sounds.
It is, yeah.
As well as how many people are exiting the company. What is your attrition? Yeah. That's also really hard. And so while you are struggling with those back-end questions and data governance and what your reporting will look like, I also typically advise folks to just get started with some things that you can control. Some things where you can run an experiment, gather fresh data, do something that will help showcase the kind of insight, intuition, and powerful change that is possible if you take an analytics approach to people problems. The specific one you choose will depend on the either real or felt problems of the organization. So if one of the felt problems of the organization is, gosh, we don't have a succession plan, then diving into some analytics to help support effective succession planning might be your best strategy to gain trust and really establish yourself as a trusted advisor. That also buys you a little time to, in parallel, be working on the back end data and reporting it. The same way if managers are training or effective onboarding or reducing the number of false positives, the number of bad hires, whatever the kind of presenting problem is, there's almost always a people analytics research project you could do that would help on usually a fairly short horizon, bring some insight to those executives in a way you establish a different relationship.
So really you need to get some quick wins whilst building at the same time, but obviously focus on not the new shiny object, but really what's going to have the most impact on the business now in the current present sense. Fantastic. Definitely good advice, because otherwise there's just kind of a million different ways you can go with it. And I know from speaking to your peers that actually getting the data data set together is actually half the battle, it seems.
It might be more than half.
More than half the battle, exactly. What's some of the common mistakes that you've seen people make when building their people analytics teams?
Some mistakes that are a consequence of who's coming in and doing the work. So if you are someone who perhaps is fairly recently graduated with a doctoral degree in a discipline, economics, industrial organizational psychology, mathematics, I often see people treat work like it's a dissertation. So there'll be a very, very long involved setup. There will be a very concentrated period of isolation where you go and solve the problem. And there will be a proclamation at the end. First of all, my success rate at anything where the subtext is how much better I am at your job than you are is very, very low. It approaches zero. And so the mistake in that is not including those stakeholders, not including your co-travelers, not including the people who will be responsible for implementing whatever solution in defining the problem statement, identifying the variables that are difficult, in designing the experiment. So instead of you showing up and making them look stupid for not figuring out something that's obvious or not doing their own job well, you are now a partner in arms with them, where you are helping solve a problem that has been vexing them, and they can help define what that solution might be. And also they can prevent you from looking bad at a presentation meeting where you suggest something that is inappropriate or, in a worst case, illegal in the case of selection, where there's a constraint. That partnership not only ensures a better research program, it also ensures better relationships ongoing, and it ensures typically a much better outcome. So not treating it as sort of a hero's journey you do all alone, and rather treating it as more of an ensemble can really make a huge difference. And that's one of the mistakes I see over and over and over again, choosing hero's path rather than choosing an ensemble path.
Interesting. And that's in every different function within a business. You see that, right?
Fair.
Yeah, we see that all the time. So, and I've definitely seen that in companies I've worked in before, and it never ends well. You said to me before the show, and I know you won't mind me saying this, is that you believe that you have the best people analytics team in the world.
I totally do. Yep.
Right. What makes a great people analytics team?
First and foremost, having a group of folks who have tremendous diversity in the way that they approach problems. A mix of IO psychologists and MBAs and economists, and gosh, this team has a geologist on it, and just all kinds, social psychologists, UX researchers, data scientists. We have a tremendous variety of the skills, capabilities, and problem-solving frameworks that we're bringing forward. So a piece of it is the disciplines we're bringing forward, and of course, the incredible integrity and intellect that we bring with it. Other teams naturally will have incredible integrity and intellect as well. One of our other differentiators is the fact that we really operate that entire three-dimensional space that I was talking about earlier. In many cases, you'll find people analytics firms that are or people analytics teams that are fairly balkanized. You may have one team that deals with leadership, and you may have another team that deals with selection, and another that deals with the recruiting process, and another one that deals with engagement, and then some other people who are tending to learning analytics, for example. They lose the opportunity to tell a coherent story. They lose the opportunity to drive powerful spines through the organization. They confuse stakeholders often by using, earlier we talked about even counting people, by using slightly different definitions. One group may start leadership with managers, and another may not start leadership until directors, but they both use the word leadership on their slides. And no one knows who they're talking about. It'll create confusion in their stakeholders. It's just a natural consequence of having sort of balkanized teams. And I think the power of having our teams engage with one another gives us speed. It also gives us consistency, and it makes us easy to do business with.
Just out of curiosity, what does a typical day look like for Alexis?
One of the things that I really love about my job is the opportunity to engage with my own peers, to do work, individual contributor work that's really about the future of the company, to work with some of our executives. I've got one of my pieces of individual contributor work right now is a project where I'm doing some primary research directly with a bunch of our executives. I get to work on things that are on a very fast horizon. As you might imagine, there's a lot of sensing work going on as we all navigate the unprecedented time we're in this week, and will be for a little while further. I get to work on long-term sustainable projects and strategies. I will work with my peers in our IT and analytics and data background groups, with our specialist peers in our sort of talent management and learning groups. And I believe really strongly in essentially the development of the people on my team. One of the most important things any leader can do is really make sure that they're nurturing their own organization. So I spend a good deal of my time in career and coaching conversations with my directs, with my skip levels, with new folks who've just joined the team, and with co-travelers in other teams occasionally that have a real need to work with us. So that both gives me a nice view of what's happening on the front line of the organization. And I like to think it helps accelerate our development as a team and function overall.
What advice do you give to people in terms of presenting? Because one of the big skills I see from your peers that's extremely important is storytelling.
Oh boy, that's a really great question. And the interesting thing about storytelling, particularly storytelling with data, is there's several discrete skills within it. There are really powerful skills just around the data visualization. Yeah. How do you figure out what secrets the data holds, and how do you make those blindingly obvious to someone even walking past the conference room and just glancing in the window? They can see that, and they can see where the patterns are. There are things you can do with color and space and hue and size and movement that really are powerful. That's one of the key elements. The next is that as much as we love data, there is still a human element. And so how to personalize, how to take verbatims out of a survey or an interview project, how to turn that into story elements that would then leap off the page and make something visceral and understandable, the impact. So those are the first two. Like, what do the data say? As a data person, I'm always going to start with what the data say. How do I display that effectively? How do I complement that data with a powerful personal insight? And then the third is, more often than not, at least in my experience, there's also a voiceover, a narrative that goes along with the data visualization and that personal insight. It's really kind of fascinating. Just complete happenstance. I happen to have a little bit of a background in theater. So I did a very, very short period of time in professional theater, and really was proactively taught how to use your voice. Now, of course, I'm coughing.
As soon as you say it, it happens.
Yeah. How to use your voice, how to use your shoulders, how to use time and pauses, how to do all of those things to capture and suspend attention. And that becomes an important part of storytelling as well. So the sequencing, using space, moving close to an audience to create sort of a sense that we're a little conspiratorial.
We feel like we're getting a lesson right now. We're getting a lesson live on LinkedIn.
But using all of those skills as well can help take something that is powerful, compelling, and informative on the page and bring it to life. We're fundamentally social creatures, so being able to use some of those skills becomes really, really important. In a job a while ago, we had someone who was a media professional come in and do sort of training about a story arc. I have the privilege to have other colleagues who have at various times in their lives been media professionals as well, who will use story and physical space and volume and pausing to kind of create, again, a sense of cohesion and conspiratorial togetherness, to create sort of tension and excitement. And that bit of storytelling, I think, is underappreciated, but can be really powerful.
And let's be honest, in your space, for many people, it doesn't come natural.
It doesn't come natural for very many people. That's true.
Yeah, and as including myself, even though I do the show, it's something even I'm having to continuously work on. We talk about people analytics, but that's something that I don't think we spend enough time on, because you could have the best insights in the world for you and the team, but it needs to be told in the story and the language that the business can understand and actually get excited about and engage with.
It's been trendy in the past, and one of my own people analytics team did a half-day workshop on it. But one way to accelerate that is just study some of the principles of improv. That classic yes and can be a really powerful thing in a complex conversation. And also, typically an improv class will walk a little bit through how to use space, how to use your body, how to use your voice to create tension, to create continuity, to respond on your feet when perhaps you don't have an immediate thought. So there are some things you can do to kind of jumpstart a journey around some of that.
Yeah. I had some questions on LinkedIn. Salma on LinkedIn asked, how often do you review people analytics and the work that you're doing to take strategic decisions? Is it yearly? Is it quarterly? How often do you look back and assess where you are, what you're doing? What's the priorities?
So right now we're looking at that in a pretty deep way, about once a month.
Once a month, okay.
Once a month. So Facebook runs on a half over half schedule. We run things pretty quickly. So we do a pretty full planning cycle twice a year. And then we'll do sort of a check-in and an adjustment in a fairly thoughtful way right now, once a month. But realize that my team is a little unusual. We have a tremendous amount coming at us.
I bet, yeah.
Right, and a tremendously dynamic organization. In past organizations, it was more of a quarterly to annual cycle.
Okay.
So I think depending on what your sort of level of intensity is, what the size of your group is, and what the charter is, certainly no less than annual, but quarterly. I've run on a quarterly cycle in the past, and it's been perfectly adequate.
Yeah. Well, with such a fast-paced, moving business, monthly makes sense, but not in most companies. It may not be necessary.
Exactly. The other piece is it's quite a large team. Because of that, we have a number of managers who have individual projects where they might identify an insight that would be relevant to another team, and we need to make sure that we're pulling those together, because I may discover things in one team that change the trajectory of what another team might be doing.
What about technology? Because the technology landscape in this area is exploded over the last years. And one of the big challenges I hear from our members is that every day this new shiny object comes across their desk, and there's new solutions that are claiming to solve all of their challenges. How do you manage? I'm sure you're approached by every vendor on the planet on a daily basis, trying to work with Facebook, right? How do you, as a people analytics leader, assess what's valuable, what's not? It's such a minefield out there. Any advice that you would, or is there a particular set of questions that you ask yourself when you're assessing a vendor?
That is a really, really great question. And you are exactly correct that it is a dizzying kaleidoscope of awful things. I think last year's HR Tech conference in Las Vegas had upwards of 400 vendors. So I won't claim to know every single one of them. I think that there are a couple of really important things to bear in mind. The first is you need to know what your value proposition to that company is, to the value proposition to the organization you're serving is. So if you are chasing employee engagement, understand why and how. And it is very easy. And of course, the business development folks really want you to chase bright, shiny objects and to be excited about a possibility. But there are such a variety of approaches that sitting down and deciding what you need, what your business needs, what your particular quirks are, and writing out the kinds of needs you have as you would in a request for proposal. And then sharing that out as part of a request for proposal can be really, really clarifying. If you let the vendors be on their front foot, they will tell you how exactly what they're doing is going to solve all of your problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you take the time to do your own homework and decide, all right, what's strategically important for me, what my constraints are, what my in-house capabilities are, what my open questions are, and build those out, it can be a very clarifying exercise. I've had a number of vendors over time approach me and be excited to do work. And then when I laid them out and said, okay, here's what I actually need, some will drop out. Some will say, great, I can do 70% of that. Some will try to convince me I don't actually need those things. Some will be happy to work in partnership with other vendors to create kind of a Franken model that makes sense for me. It's sort of like the old saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. I think vendors the same way. If you don't know what you want or need, vendors can be tremendous, and they will certainly take you somewhere. If you are a relatively new team, partnering with a good vendor can be a huge accelerator. If you're a relatively new team and you have the opportunity to partner with a really strong vendor around employee engagement, for example, that can accelerate you in a way that your team of 3 or 4 could never pull off. So they can be a really, really powerful part of your ecosystem. The question is to remember kind of who's in charge.
Yeah, love it. Great advice. Because it's what something I've been thinking about a lot recently. Stefan said, based on your previous point, he said, without an adoption strategy and upskilling program for HR, any dashboard is just another, BI or HR tool.
You are not wrong. And it's so frustrating and heartbreaking and saddening to see how folks will say, hey, we just need a dashboard. If I just had this dashboard, that would solve all the problems. Everyone would naturally and organically go there and they would know all the things and be a perfect solution. And someone gets excited and they build one, and maybe it's a really pretty easy one they just built on their desktop in Shiny or something effective in Tableau. And then you look at the web metrics and like 9 people will have accessed it over the last 6 months. And you just weep.
I bet that must be painful.
Yeah, it can be very painful. I think that data are really important. The keys to usability of a dashboard are really understanding the business process as opposed to thinking that the dashboard is a Band-Aid that will solve everything. So who needs information? At what point in their business process do they need that information? What information do they need? How do they need to consume it? What do they need to do with that information? Is it context? Are they sharing it with a client? Are they using it for recommendations? Often a push system is better than a pull system. Often dashboards don't change that much. So what can you do to help make it easy, not for you as an analyst who doesn't want to pull it every time, but rather for that user to receive an alert either proactively through whatever channel you're using, or receive an alert on that page that prioritizes, hey, here's something that's gone sort of out of spec if you want to go back and think about classic statistical process control methods. Anything you can do to help make sure that the dashboard is, first of all, well-designed, second of all, highly usable, and third of all, present at the moment that you need it and not in a place where you just habituate to it and don't notice it. Those become really important. You're right that adoption strategy and upskilling become important. I do have a design principle that anything that requires training probably has fundamental design flaws. And no one trained me how to use online banking. I am pretty good at making a payment.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, you have a training. Yeah.
Good user experience and good workflow solve a lot, as opposed to having sort of a data first. These people need to know this, and I will just sort of vomit it on them with 30 pages and expect them to go trolling for the piece of information they need. If you can really invest in good user experience and good UI, that's as important for internal projects. Some of the large tech firms have an explicit policy of having sort of commercial quality internal tools for this reason. Good UX principles are really, really important and go a long way to some of that dashboard usability as well.
Almost make or break in many cases if you don't have the right user experience. I had a CHRO recently that was on the show. I'm not going to mention the name, but they said to me after the show, we just rolled out a new tool, Chris, and we aligned it with a training program within our LMS, and they were really panicking that no one literally no one had gone in there and taken the training. And he called me a week later and said, Chris, you never guess what? And I was like, what? He was like, the reason no one used it is because the tool was so easy to use and no one needed to actually go in and do the training. And we was just both just laughing as well. I was like, but the team was panicking. They were like, what's going on? Why is no one using it? No one's engaging. But I was like, no, you're looking at the wrong numbers. Like, go and look
exactly.
So it was just quite funny to hear them panicking and realizing that actually it was so good, like the online banking example, that you didn't need to do a train. We don't need to do a 10, 20-minute training session on how to use a mobile app for your banking.
Exactly.
So yeah. First of all, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us. It's been a real pleasure. I'm so happy we've managed that time to speak, and I'm sure everyone on LinkedIn's got a lot of it. I'm sure they've written a lot of notes to go back with to the office. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to jump into our quick fire round. So I ask, every single guest that comes on the show 5 questions.
Oh boy!
It's a quick fire round, so you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Let's go.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior people analytics leader?
Spending too much time focusing on the data and not enough on the story and influence.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
You are not the smartest person in the room.
What's one book you'd recommend to our audience and why?
I really loved Laszlo Bock's Work Rules if you're going to think about people analytics.
Could you share some internet resources you use to stay up to date with current events and for your own personal development and learning?
Yeah, I use LinkedIn. Every morning I go through LinkedIn and I go through Flipboard, which I have set to sort of the computer science and technology channels as well as general science. So those I do every day, as well as reading the New York Times and the Guardian and a couple of other media outlets.
Fantastic. And what's one thing about your business that you're most excited about?
Oh, man, I am so excited about the opportunity to make people's lives better and more connected.
Yeah, amazing. You literally did under 30 seconds. It's like most people, that was impressive because most people sitting there and they give me the and the and I don't know, Chris, but you nailed it.
All right, I'm going to take that as a compliment.
No, it definitely is a compliment. Fantastic. Well, I'll link that all in the description for everyone listening, by the way, as well. But thank you so much for sort of taking the time out to join us. Before we wrap up, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice you'd give to everyone listening, what would that be? And then where's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they want to connect?
Oh, wonderful. So I think the best piece of advice is really to pay attention to the influence strategies and making sure that you are listening to and incorporating all the voices that will be required to actually make work successful. That goes back to you are not the smartest person in the room. And then I'm available on LinkedIn. There are not that many Alexis, and there's only one who looks like me. So it's pretty easy to
Amazing. Well, look, thanks again for joining us. If you're not already subscribed to the show, head over to hrdealers.com/subscribe. You can catch it on demand there, listen to all the previous episodes as well. Apart from that, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you all again on the next show. See you later, Alexis.
Thank you.
Bye.